Hi, my name is Benedict. I wanted to walk you through a couple of little adjustments and changes to Alien Seed Tech's Kron. As you may know, I've had quite a bit of involvement with Mr. Seed and Kron from the beginning. Wrote a great big article about it when it came out. Was very excited, and I still stay excited about Kron to this day, because there's a lot that it can do if you're really in that mind space. But there's also a lot you can do even if you don't think you're in the mind space for that Eurorack modular kind of thing. So the first obvious thing that I'll show you in the feature that I'm focusing on today is in the modular type environment. But then I'm going to show you something that absolutely isn't in the modular type environment that you may not think of doing with something like Kron. So the update that I'm looking at today in particular is the way that the new menus have been tidied up a lot, which I really like. But here we're using a very simple Thor sound, which does nothing. Flying in a CV, we're assigning that CV to 100% to the pitch of oscillator 1 and 50% to the filter frequency. So no other modulation going on internally here at all. As you can hear, a pretty basic sound. Tiny bit of delay just to make it feel a little less dry and creepy. So we'll close that up. So it's all going to happen from here. We're using one LFO, and some of the new features are the extra things that we can do when we're drawing waves, particularly here to randomize. So we can randomize the waveform both from the X and the Y axis. So X being this way, Y being that way. So you'll see if I choose that, I then click somewhere here. Cool. So essentially endless variations on this sort of thing. Now I'd leave it for you to really decide how much you would want to do with this, what you'd want to do with this. But it shows you that there are an awful lot of things that you can do. Not only in very bold strokes by using a complete randomize, but in reduced strokes by randomizing using the smooth knob amount. So the smooth knob, you can say, well, how much randomization do I want in this button press? So as you see, the movements are pretty small. So if we fundamentally like what we hear, but we want to hear it slightly differently, then we could use a randomize function. So you might decide to set up 4 different LFOs, which are essentially using the same core sound, but just variations of, which means you can copy and paste across your 4 waveforms. Again, I'm not really going to go into that much here. Mostly I wanted to cover the obvious use. That's not really what I wanted to spend a lot of time with you. We'll make Mr. Thor go away. We'll look at a use that you may not think of. So we'll walk through this sound to start with. We've got there is the ability to add a little internal LFO, but I'm not going to focus too much on that. It's what we're flying in. So we're flying in the first LFO to change engine 1's pitch, second LFO to change the filter cutoff, third LFO to change pitch of engine 2, which will so see, I've got them panned slightly apart. Probably easier if I but I don't love that way of tying a sound to having too many octaves at once. And it was very popular, but I don't love doing it from a composer's perspective, because as I'm playing note here, it's tying me into having a note an octave below, and it can be nice, but I don't always love it. It messes up with the harmonization. Horrifying that I might say that. And then a little bit of amp gain. So the other feature of the patch just on its own, applying a little bit of saturation. Don't want to focus too much on the patch creation, so that's just a patch. So what we have is a nice string pad type thing. But it's once we start to add in all these elements, I'll turn them all off here for the moment. You see for the moment I had Kron turned off, I've turned it on. So I've created different random waveforms here. That one's not so much. This one I drew by hand. So we'll work through them. So number one is a random waveform. Now remember this one it's assigned to oscillator 1, just a pitch. So it's just creating a wander. Now hopefully if you're listening carefully, and I personally find it much better on speakers than in cans, you hear that sound suddenly just become that little bit bigger, deeper, richer, more organic sounding. If we add so what this is doing is adding a little bit of wander, that's this one here, adding a little bit of wander to the filter cutoff. Seeing this is designed to be an organic sounding sound, something that works within the film string type arena, we don't want that to be too dramatic. You'll also notice I've set these just to not be BPM synced. When you're doing wanders, I think it's a very bad idea to BPM sync them unless you're designing they're part of the phrasing. But in this case, I don't want to do that. We're creating irregularity. So we've got just adding that little bit of movement, and we'll turn on this one. What this one was assigned to, recall, was oscillator 2, and it's a far more traditional just LFO, so sine wave. It's moving that sound. So what we're essentially doing is we've got our main sound, which is oscillator 1, and then we're adding a second sound that moves within that. Again. Nice but flat. Add just those little extra bits of movement. If we make them too obvious, in other words, if we increase the amount of the modulation here, then we end up with a sound that actually ends up becoming more synthy, or more just wandering the hell out of tune, which is not very attractive. And the last feature I added here, which you have to be very, very careful of, you see it's running quite fast, and this one I hand drew, is a little bit of tremolo. That's assigned to the overall gain of the instrument inside here. So only a very small amount. If we start to add too much, it gets very choppy. We're not looking for a gator effect here. There's no reason why you couldn't, but remember, I'm wanting to show you what you may not think of in using a device like Kron. Kron, you'd easily think, oh yeah, that's for Eurorack type people who want to be modular and bleep 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 and bleep bleep bleep. And that's wonderful. It's a great thing that this does. But I wanted to open up the possibility, remember, of applying this to a sound so that we make it go from flat and synthy to having just that little bit more depth. Okay, yeah, it's synthy. I'm not particularly trying to say I'm creating Hans Zimmer strings here. That's not what I'm looking for, but if you're looking to improve the depth of either a synth sound or, say, Reason's orchestra, which is not a bad orchestral sound set, but it's very, very flat. You need to work on that to build it up. So this is a way that you can do that. You can apply some of these features into your NN instrument that's running orchestra sounds. I guess if you do have a big contact library of some kind, east-west strings or whatever, I don't think they use contact actually, but you know what I'm talking about, then there's also no reason why you couldn't fly in similar sorts of things to end up giving your instrumental articulations performances a little bit more depth. So just to recap, what we've covered is that there are new nested drop downs with the menus, so much nicer. But here in the waveform editor, you've got this drop down, it's tidied up, but it's also brought in randomize functions so that we can take a waveform like this one. We can set ourselves to randomize X and Y values. And use those either to do extreme bleepy things or to do subtle things like this, which add movement and depth to a sound. So two sides of what you can do with Kron. I hope you found this interesting and or useful.